Thanks for the invitation to Filosofikon. My name is Andres Torres Scott, and I'm going to speak about Octavia Butler's The Parable of the Sower, an interpretation of three apocalyptic tropes. The tropes I'm gonna address are the religious trope, female leadership, and the Hobbesian state of nature. But first, let's get into the plot. This novel is part of the apocalyptic fiction subgenre, in which civilization is collapsing due to a climatic change. There is a scarcity of drinkable water, and rains are random. But the origins of this climate change are not explained in the novel. The story takes place in California, and there's a corruption of social norms. There's indebted servitude, which is legal again. Gang violence is usual. The federal government is weak. And states to the north of California and Canada are said to have drinkable water, good paid jobs, and enjoy law and order. But none of these are confirmed through the novel. The protagonist of the Parable of the Sower is Lauren Olamina, a black teenager. She's the daughter of a Baptist reverend. She's been educated in part by a Hispanic mother. She speaks Spanish. We get into her story in the midst of social turmoil in the year 2024, on the day of her 15th birthday, which happens to be her father's 55th birthday. She lives in Robledo, a walled Southern California community. In addition, Lauren suffers from hyperempathy, an extrasensorial perception disease caused by her mother having a drug named Parasetco. This makes Lauren feel other people's pleasure and pain, and certainly under an apocalyptic setting, most of the feelings that people are gonna share are about pain and not about pleasure. It happens in most of the apocalyptic fiction genre. We meet Lauren through her own diary and learn that besides writing on the current events she's facing, she also writes her own interpretation of God, her own religion. She calls her text Earthseed, the books of the living. Her interpretation is that God is, and that the destiny of the human race is to leave Earth and colonize other planets. 2. Female leadership. In the Parable of the Sower, leadership is female leadership, represented by the protagonist Lauren Olamina. We meet her as a 15-year-old who has a multicultural background. She has been educated by her stepmother, who is named Corey, and has a Hispanic background. She says she speaks Spanish, but across the novel she never says a word in Spanish. The following table compares selected Lauren's characteristics with other two protagonists of apocalyptic fiction works. I choose Lionel Verney, the first protagonist of a modern apocalyptic novel, The Last Man by Mary Shelley. I choose him because the novel was written by a woman, and I also choose Offred, the protagonist of Margaret Atwood's The Handmaid's Tale. And I'm referring to Offred in the book, not in the series. You may know her by the name June, but it is not clear that her name is June in the novel. In addition, I include a column referencing the popular 11-year-old TV show The Walking Dead to see if the tropes and the roles appear here too. You can see the table on the screen. The Parable of the Sower, 1993, compared to The Last Man, 1826, Handmaid's Tale, 1985, and the current airing of The Walking Dead. 3 of these have been written by women. The first 3. The other one are The Walking Dead is a creation by graphic artists and writers. Point of view. The first 3 are diaries. Margaret Atwood's novel is a recorded diary, plus a metafictional epilogue. Here we do not have anything else. We have only Lauren Olamina's diary and the verses of her Earthseed religion. That does not count as a point of view, obviously. The narratological focus. All of the novels have an intradiegetic narrator and protagonist. The Walking Dead, this switches, this changes, but most of the times is a third person or extra diegetic narrator of point of view. The years the story takes place, this parable of the sower, by pure coincidence, is very close to our date, 2024 to 2027. The others are a little bit further away, and The Walking Dead is taking place, right now, live action. Technological advancements, it's strange that none of these have any technological advances as other science fiction apocalyptic novels. Only slow-flying globes in The Last Man of Mary Shelley, 1826. She was definitely not putting emphasis on technological advancement. Then we enter into the most interesting thing: leaders promoting a religion. And the inventor of this, of the crazy prophet, dividing a group, creating a coercive religion to take advantage of the end of the world, to survive and dominate other based on Judeo-Christian tradition, is this guy in Mary Shelley's Last Man, a crazy prophet. And this trope of a prophet trying to create a coercive religion and take advantage is repeated through most other apocalyptic novels or TV series. Well, in The Handmaid's Tale, these crazy guys are the rulers of the state, or Gilead, whatever is it called. In The Walking Dead, as in George Romero movies, we see the appearance of several priests that become a cult and are trying to divide the population in order to gather people for their own benefit. The parable of the Sower, this is different, and this is what makes the novel more attractive. The protagonist, Lauren, is creating a religion to survive, not to divide. She's creating a religion to gather people, not to promote coercion. And it is not based on the fear of God or under the Judeo-Christian tradition. This is a first on an apocalyptic fiction. The female leaders, evident that in Mary Shelley's The Last Man, there's no woman as the leader. Of course, a woman would have not been attractive on those times, and only we have two here: Lauren Olamina in The Parable of the Sower, and Offred, or June, Handmaid's Tale. In The Walking Dead, we have Maggie, Michonne, and Carol, but they never assume a long-term leadership for a community. Yeah, basically it's male characters that are the leaders, not women in The Walking Dead. Of course, it's written by men, so why to propose a female as a leader? Now, this is more interesting. Mention of feminine hygiene articles. In The Parable of the Sower, there are two mentions, because they stop in a store and they sell, it's a pharmacy, and, well, she asks for tampons. And when she leaves her home, she looks for tampons. The most natural thing to do. While in The Last Man, of course, there are some women survivors, but we never hear anything about tampons or periods or anything like that. Of course, that would be of bad taste in Victorian England. Handmaid's Tale, there's no mention of pads or tampons, only to describe an object similar to a pad, but nothing else. And of course, in The Walking Dead, when they stopped into a store or into a place where they find things, not men, not women, they do not look for a hygienic product. Menstruation does not exist in The Walking Dead. I don't know if it is still, or at any point was forbidden to mention in the US series, but they do not menstruate. Women at The Walking Dead do not menstruate, and they don't care if they bleed their pants. Or, of course, this is a screenplay written by men. Black characters' main feats. In The Parable of the Sower, the protagonist is a small, multicultural young teenager. In The Last Man, well, the couple of black men that appear are portrayed as miserable, evil, assassins, and sick. Totally a 19th century colonial stereotype. Handmaid's Tale, well, black Americans are known as the children of Ham and are resettled, but we do not know anything else. In the TV series, you can see possibly some black women around, but that is not happening in the novel. In The Walking Dead, well, the appearance of black characters is non-stereotypical, is aligned with political correctness. They are heroes and villains. They are female and male, totally neutral. There's no stigma on black characters. Magical or paranormal occurrences? Well, in the parable of the Sower, the protagonist has an extrasensory perception ability that makes her feel others' pain and pleasure, which is more like a handicap and not an ability to take advantage of any situation, because you have to kill people all the time during an apocalypse. So you are suffering every time you kill something because you feel what the other feels. So it's great handicap. In The Last Man, there's the appearance of a black spectre, an eclipse, and in The Handmaid's Tale and The Walking Dead, I didn't find any paranormal or magical occurrences. Of course, there could be. I could have skipped one or two. Let's wrap up. So in the parable of the Sower, we can see a protagonist who's different in several aspects. Her perception of black people is different. Second, she's a female teenager, and this is not a young adult novel. She is also handicapped by an inherent sickness, hyperempathy. It is still a handicap. No other protagonist is handicapped in apocalyptic novels. She's multiculturally educated. Have not seen this in other protagonists of apocalyptic novel. And as a result of all these, she has not prejudices against, specifically against black people, but also, and we can see through the novel, against Hispanic or Korean people. This is an interesting point because it is not due to political correctness or to television broadcaster guidelines, but to an intrinsic part of the plot and of the story. Finally, she is the only leader not using religion to divide a group, but to gather people together. And this is the most important thing here, that this is the first apocalyptic novel where religion, the use of religion, is not used for bad, but for good. Part 3, use of religion. Since the first apocalyptic modern novel, The Last Man by Mary Shelley, religion has been seen in times of apocalypse as a tool to divide, dominate, and abuse others. This trope is recurrent and it appears in apocalyptic works and especially movies. You can see it on most of George Romero's The Living Dead and its multiple remakes, and more recently all around the Walking Dead sitcom. This is not the case in the parable of the Sower. Lauren's new religion of change is named Earthseed. I think the word is encompassing both sexes and unifying opposite, as earth is a reference for femininity, for Mother Earth, and seed is a clear inclusion of masculinity, as seed and semen come from the Latin word seminis. On this Earthseed religion, God is change. The narrator does not present a theological dissertation on the validity of her religious ideas, but just simple verses of the Book of the Living across the chapters of the book. Among the verses, I think this is the most relevant. All that you touch, you change. All that you change, changes you. The only lasting truth is change. God is change. Earthseed is explained in the Book of the Living. The name is given by Lauren to contrast the title of the Tibetan and Egyptian Book of the Dead. In the same very name, we can find the first idea against Christianity, because the Book of the Living is not a religion for the dead, for the afterworld. Earthseed is a religion for the living. In this sense, it has a Nietzschean tone, as it praises the ones alive and avoids any affection towards the afterworld, which is certainly a crucial foundation for Christianity. Earthseed is a nature-friendly religion. The community Lauren organizes is not male-centered, and it does not impose the idea that nature and man are separated and conflicted. The traditional point of view of Judeo-Christianity is that man can take anything he needs from nature and use it for his own survival without any responsibility. On the other hand, on Earthseed, Lauren enforces a feminine point of view towards nature, somehow in a reconciliatory tone, where preserving nature for survival is worth more than destroying it for the same ends. I think this idea of man having all rights over nature comes from the Adam and Eve tale. Eve is the one being compassive and approachable to nature, even to a serpent. She's the one getting closer to it and getting an apple. However, the consequential expulsion of both Adam and Eve from the Garden of Eden made man believe he could do whatever he wanted to dominate nature. It is in this sense that we could see in Lauren a new Eve. However, Lauren can also be seen as a new Messiah, a new Christ, because she is bringing a new logos, a new word, a new parable that proposes reconciliation with nature and that is breaking with the old thoughts, as Jesus broke with the Old Testament. Octavia Butler mentions in an interview that she was inspired by the prominence of change in Buddhism to choose it as the main column of Lauren's religion. Nevertheless, I think Lauren's religion is closer to the original ideas of Heraclitus and Parmenides. Earthseed religion is intrinsically different from the male interpretation of Christianity, in the sense that it does not understand nature as an uncontrollable force that must be tamed, but a force that we need to live with. Moreover, Earthseed does not seek to differentiate Earthseed believers from unbelievers, as it happens in Christianity and Islam, where unbelievers are named infidels, and as it is the case of biblical Jewish, where the other peoples are simply not considered even human at all. There are different interpretations about Heraclitus and Parmenides, but I'm going to stick to Martin Heidegger's idea that both philosophers tried to explain the same thing and not to go against each. And what both were defending was the idea of the permanence of change to understand being. For Heraclitus, the existence is the union of opposites, the union of opposites in generation and destruction. For Heraclitus, this oppositional process was called eris, strife, and the unity of these opposites provoke change. So there is strife, war against opposites, and in the union of these opposites, change is either omitted or included. There's the famous fragment of the rebirth attributed to Heraclitus. It is impossible to step in the same river twice, or we both step and do not step in the same rivers. We are and are not. So the river remains, but the water changes. We remain, but at the same time we are not the same the second time we step into the rivers. So change is present with impermanence. On the other hand, Parmenides said that change is impossible, that reality is only one, and existence is timeless. So his philosophy has been synthesized with saying whatever is, and what is not, cannot be. So let's put an example. An egg is an egg and a chicken is a chicken. Both are different things. But are they totally different? Can we say that the chicken is not an egg and that the egg is not a chicken? Well, for Parmenides, there is not egg separated from chicken. We cannot say that an egg is not a chicken or that a chicken is not an egg. So, as from nothing comes nothing, as Parmenides said, and thus change does not exist, and things are despite appearances, everything exists as one giant, unchanging thing. So change is basically unexistent, or the paste that is sticking together all the stances of being. So how do we understand change in the Earthseed religion? Well, first, and according to Heraclitus, in the sense of a strife between opposites that get unified through change. And again, the opposites find another contrary to transform themselves. So they remain as the river, and they keep flowing with different waters. Second, and according to Parmenides, change is not a being. God is not a being. Change in Earthseed is the paste that brings together beings. Change is the element that unifies transformation on things, on all things, which are at the end one and only unchanging thing. Fourth, Hobbesian state of nature. All around the parable of the Sower, the reader can see scenes of violence against the small established communities. The main example is Robledo, where Lauren and her family live. Inside these walled communities like Robledo, you can have a tranquil life. However, you have to go outside this walled community to get to your job, to study, to go to the stores. In the case of the parable of the sower, if you get outside, there's no law. You have to pay the police if you are assaulted, raped, or robbed. And if you don't pay, they are not going to follow the crime. In political theory, this means that the state is not present all over the territory. This means there's no force to enforce the social contract. Thomas Hobbes in the 17th century brought the idea of a social contract among people in order to live in peace. He thought that as men are evil by nature, we need to enforce a social contract in which we will cede part of our will to a king, to a sovereign. Then, guilelessness and egalitarianism are exchanged for knowledge and subordination. For instance, we'll not be able to build a house wherever we want, but in return we will have protection against other persons. Hobbes said, "And which is worst of all, continual fear and danger of violent death, and the life of man, solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short." That is what is life like in the state of nature without a social contract. This is what is happening outside Robledo, but as the surroundings are so violent and there's no social contract anymore, Robledo at a certain point gets burnt and is totally destroyed. Inside these walled communities like Robledo, you can have a tranquil life. However, you have to go outside this walled community to get to your job, to study, to go to the stores. In the case of the parable of the sower, if you get outside, there's no law. You have to pay the police if you are assaulted, raped, or robbed. And if you don't pay, then nobody is going to prosecute the crime. In political theory, this means that the state is not present all over the territory. There's no force to enforce the social contract. Thomas Hobbes in the 17th century brought the idea of a social contract among people in order to live in peace. He thought that as men are evil by nature, we need to enforce a social contract in which we will cede part of our will to a king, to a sovereign. Then, guilelessness and egalitarianism are exchanged for knowledge and subordination. For instance, we'll not be able to build a house wherever we want, but in return we will have protection against other persons, as they are all evil, right? Hobbes said, "And which is worst of all, continual fear and danger of violent death, and the life of man, solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short." That is what is life like in the state of nature without a social contract. This is what is happening outside Robledo, but as the surroundings are so violent and there's no social contract anymore, Robledo at a certain point gets burnt and is totally destroyed. After Robledo is burnt and all the family members of our protagonist Lauren are missing or possibly dead, she faces a period of change, or strife, as Heraclitus said, where a new social contract is needed. And this is what pushes Lauren to start preaching. So it is in this sense that Lauren breaks with the stereotypical mold of the leading survivor protagonist in an apocalypse that is preaching a religion to divide and get in power. She is preaching a religion, and instead of resisting destruction, she tries to live with the effects caused by that destruction. She uses religion to embrace change and to adapt. So I'm going to go back to Hobbes. In his theory, the king embodies the will of all subjects, and this idea becomes the Leviathan, the mortal god, the state that is going to protect us as we cede part of our liberties. This change from being a savage to being a citizen is only achieved by resigning to a part of our own will. What happens in the parable of the sower is that Earthseed, this new religion, is the new Leviathan, the element bringing together the wills of the people to create a new social contract, a new Leviathan. Earthseed is also change in this brutish, savage word. Change is God, and it is bringing people together. It is the transformation element unifying the whole, as Parmenides also said. Conclusions. Well, first of all, we have a new teenager leader in a not young adult novel who is black, who is a female, and is multicultural. This is a very first in apocalyptic novels. Second, and this is also very first in apocalyptic novels, religion is used to gather people together, not to divide. The religious leader is not a crazy guy fostering hate against the ones not belonging to this religion. Third, Earthseed is a religion of change, similar to the philosophical explanations of Heraclitus and Parmenides, and not a promotion of the afterworld. So, thank you very much. This is all, and read Parable of the Sower by Octavia Butler. Thank you.